first, none of us reacted. The forest had a way of producing sounds that felt personal, branches creaking like joints, water shifting beneath mud, the long sigh of roots adjusting in saturated soil. We were days from the nearest road, deep in a stretch of wilderness so old the maps called it simply untracked. The ground there was never still. It breathed, settled, it remembered weight. So when the earth murmured beneath our boots, we told ourselves it was nothing. The trail was narrow and half-drowned, a seam of darker soil winding through colossal trunks whose bark peeled in wet, fibrous layers. Moss glistened everywhere, drinking what little light slipped through the canopy. The air was cold in pockets, as if something underground exhaled unevenly. Each step sank deep, the soil yielding with a damp suction that vibrated faintly through our legs. That vibration was the first sign. I felt it before I heard it. A soft, delayed tremor rising up through my heel, not the impact of my footfall but an answering pressure. When I lifted my boot, the sensation faded. When I stepped again, it returned, perfectly aligned with my movement. Then came the sound. A muted scrape, low and dull, like a shovel dragged slowly through wet clay. It traveled beneath the surface, indistinct yet precise, keeping pace with us in a way that made my stomach tighten. We stopped. The sound stopped too. The silence that followed was wrong. Not the peaceful quiet of deep woods, but a held breath. Even the distant drip of water vanished, as though the forest itself were listening. "Did you hear that?" Mara whispered. Jonah nodded without looking at her. His eyes were fixed on the ground, scanning for holes, burrows, anything that could explain the sound. "Something's moving down there." I shifted my weight experimentally. The scrape returned instantly. Step, scrape, step, scrape. The timing was flawless, too flawless. There was no lag, no correction. Whatever was beneath us knew when we were going to move before the motion finished, as if it felt intention rather than impact. We altered our pace. Faster, slower, a sudden halt. The underground movement mirrored us every time. "Animal," Jonah said, though his voice lacked conviction. "Big one, maybe, following vibrations." But animals didn't behave like this. Animals reacted. This felt anticipatory. As we descended into a shallow basin, the soil darkened and softened further, rich with rot and centuries of fallen leaves. The air grew noticeably colder, sinking into our clothes and skin. Each breath fogged faintly. Roots surfaced everywhere, thick and knotted. Some snapped clean through as though stressed from below. The vibrations intensified. The ground beside us began to bulge. Not breaking the surface, not yet. Just swelling, rising and low, traveling mounds that slid alongside our legs before sinking back down. Fine roots lifted and vanished again, dragged inward. The scraping sound changed, becoming wetter, more rhythmic, like chewing or breathing through packed earth. Mara stumbled and nearly fell when the ground surged too close. "It's right there," she whispered, terror sharpening her voice. We ran. The forest resisted us immediately. Branches snagged our packs. Logs rolled beneath our feet. Every misstep was answered by a violent lurch below, the soil heaving in waves that followed our path with horrifying accuracy. The sound grew louder, no longer subtle but deliberate, digging with purpose, with speed. Whispers began to rise from the ground. Not words, not voices, just the impression of speech crushed into vibration, like something practicing language by pressing breath through dirt. When I pressed my hand to the soil, it pulsed back, warm, responsive, alive. We burst into a wide clearing where the canopy thinned and the ground dipped unnaturally low, like a shallow sinkhole. The soil there was torn and scarred, as if the forest had been rooting through itself. Bones lay half-buried, old, smoothed by time and pressure, some too large or too fused to belong to any animal I recognized. The digging stopped. The sudden silence was unbearable. Then the earth rose. A ridge of soil surged upward between us, long and sinuous, stretching knee-high before splitting open. Beneath it wasn't flesh, but something worse, layers of root, stone, and compacted remains woven together into a moving mass. The ground flexed like muscle. The whispers sharpened into anticipation. I understood then. It wasn't following sound. It was reading us, learning weight, balance, rhythm. The forest floor was its body. Every footstep was a signal pressed directly into its skin. Jonah screamed as the earth seized his ankle. The soil liquefied around his boot, pulling him down with steady, patient force. Roots coiled like fingers, tightening with careful precision. We grabbed him, hauling back, but the ground resisted, molding itself around his leg like a mouth learning a shape. "It wants us spaced," he cried, panic breaking his voice. "It's—" The pull intensified. The outline beneath the soil became clearer. A massive curvature moving just below the surface, repositioning, encircling. The whispers roared through my teeth and bones. Mara let go first. I followed, a heartbeat later. Jonah vanished without a sound. The earth closed over him smoothly, leaving only a shallow depression that slowly filled itself in. The forest exhaled. We ran again, but now the digging no longer followed behind us. It surged ahead, cutting us off, shaping the ground to hurt us deeper. Toward softer soil, older layers, places the forest had buried and forgotten. The vibrations beneath our feet changed pattern, no longer mirroring, but guiding, leading. The whispers settled into something like satisfaction. Whatever lived beneath the forest floor had learned enough, and it was done playing. It revealed itself the way mistakes do, quietly, at the edge of perception, easy to dismiss if you didn't stop and look directly at it. The forest was old enough that the sky felt theoretical. Above us, layers of interlocked branches stitched the darkness into something solid, bark and needles swallowing most of the night. The trail we followed was little more than compressed soil, damp and springy underfoot, winding through trunks thick enough that 3 people could not have wrapped arms around them. Cold pooled near the ground, sliding around our calves in invisible currents. Each breath tasted of wet leaves and iron-rich earth. We had been walking for hours when Mara slowed and tilted her head back. "Do you see that?" she asked. At first, I thought she meant the ordinary moon, pale, distant, glimpsed only in broken fragments between leaves. But then my eyes adjusted, and I felt that subtle internal shift that comes when the world no longer fits its own rules. There were 2. The first moon sat where it should have, dull and familiar, its light fractured by the canopy. The second hovered lower, larger than it had any right to be, its glow tinted faintly blue-gray, like frost caught in glass. It did not shine so much as seep, its light filtering down through gaps in the branches and clinging to bark, to moss, to the edges of our hands. I waited for someone else to comment. Jonah said nothing. Neither did Eli. They kept walking, boots whispering through leaf litter, faces slack with fatigue. "You see the other one, right?" I asked. Jonah glanced up, then back at me. "Other what?" The forest felt different immediately after that. Quieter, but not peacefully so. The usual night sounds had thinned, as if something had turned down a dial. No insects, no distant owls. Even the wind had gone still, leaving the air heavy and expectant. The second moon moved. Not fast. Not enough to be obvious unless you watched it for a long time. But it drifted independently of the first, sliding sideways through the lattice of branches, its light bending strangely, casting shadows that pointed the wrong direction. When I shifted my position, those shadows lagged behind, as if deciding whether to follow. We continued on, unease settling into my chest like a held breath. The deeper we went, the more the forest seemed to reorient itself toward that alien glow. Trunks leaned subtly, their growth warped just enough to be noticed. Leaves turned their pale undersides upward. Lichen along rocks brightened, reflecting the light with an oily sheen. Animals vanished. We passed a stream where frogs should have been calling. Silence. A fallen log pocked with old burrows, empty. Even the birds' nests overhead were abandoned, swaying gently as if recently vacated. Mara was the only one who kept looking up with me. Her eyes reflected the second moon faintly, the way water does. "It's not in the sky," she whispered. "It's closer than that." As if in answer, the glow intensified. The forest floor brightened just enough to reveal details we hadn't noticed before. Old scars in the bark, deep grooves worn into stone, patterns in the roots that repeated too often to be coincidence. When we crossed a shallow pool, our reflections did not match our movements. My mirrored self looked up when I didn't. Mara's reflection smiled a moment too late. We stopped when the trees ahead began to bend. Not snapping, not breaking, just leaning, their crowns angling toward a widening shaft of pale light. The second moon had settled directly above us now, perfectly framed by the canopy, its surface smooth and depthless, like a pupil dilated wide. The forest was no longer indifferent. I felt it in the way the ground held my weight more carefully, in the way the air pressed close to my skin. Something had awakened, not arrived, but remembered. From between the trunks, shapes shifted. Not creatures, not yet. Just absences moving where no shadows should have been, their outlines warping as the light passed through them. When I focused on one, it stilled, mimicking the shape of a tree. When I looked away, it leaned closer. "They're watching us," Mara said. I realized then that the second moon wasn't illuminating the forest. It was signaling it. The light pulsed once, slow and deliberate. In response, the ground vibrated faintly, a sensation more felt than heard. Roots tightened beneath the soil. The air grew colder, dense enough to fog our breath in thick clouds. Eli finally noticed something was wrong when the trail behind us closed. Trees that hadn't been there before leaned inward, their branches interlocking, sealing the path with practiced efficiency. Ahead, the forest opened, inviting, bathed in that soft, terrible glow. The second moon descended, not falling, approaching. Its surface resolved into texture, subtle ridges like growth rings. I understood then that it wasn't a moon at all, not in the way we meant the word. It was a lens, and a threshold. The forest had not grown beneath it by accident. "This is where it looks back," Mara said, voice steady with a certainty that frightened me more than panic would have. The light washed over us, and the watching shapes solidified, imitations of trunks, of branches, of human posture learned through long observation. The reflections in the water below stood up on their own, stepping out of the surface with careful, practiced movements. Behind us, the ordinary moon slipped behind the canopy and vanished from view. The second moon remained, and as its glow settled fully into the forest, I realized the truth with perfect, dreadful clarity. It had not appeared so we could see it. It had appeared so the forest could finally see us.